right, welcome everybody to damn, I don't even know. Brian usually says the number of the episode. So Eric, you did the socials today, so you know what number we're on?
Let's throw a shot in the dark and say
All
139
right.
because I'm gonna check it
All
right
right.
after I say it.
Welcome to
So
episode 139 of Flippin the Birds, everybody.
139.
Heck yeah. All right. This is what you get a good team for, so they can pick you up when you're a little bit off. So yeah, Brian's not with us today, fellas. He's feeling a little bit under the weather. Just think he got really scared from the comeback from the Lions and just been, feeling all kinds of ways. Um, but I'm excited to be joined here by Eric and Zach, our lovely other team members, and we're gonna break down the lines today. So, immediate thoughts, fellas. What do you think about the Eagles Lions game?
Too close for comfort. It should have never
Mm.
been that close. I thought the defense, I was praising defense heavily in the first half. That touchdown, the opening drive, and then a touchdown let up on the last drive of the half. And then the second half, we saw a lot of just Gannon letting the teams right back into the game, and that's just not something that you get in the habit of in any sport at all, especially in the NFL when you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you have these expectations to maybe win 12 games.
Yeah, I would obviously kind of say the same thing as far as they say a win's a win, but is it? A win's a win, but I feel like that kind of more stands true in the ultimate game, in say the Super Bowl, because the way that I look at it, that's a win over the Detroit Lions, but if some of these problems maintain, this game's not going to be a win against other teams. The way the Eagles played on Sunday is not going to result as a win against teams like, well, I don't know, the Minnesota Vikings, for instance, who are just a better team than the Detroit Lions. So there were a lot of things that did impress me. Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders at the forefront. Jordan Davis actually was very good and impactful in just an extremely limited role. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute. But there were good things to be had. I don't mean to be all kind of sour, downtrodden. Skies falling. It's not. We got the win. Eagles are 1-0. Okay, it's a great start. You gotta clean things up if we're gonna actually make some noise this year. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think something that we've all kind of been talking about for a bit is that I just feel like the Lions were always going to be a better team than most people give them credit for this year. I mean, last year they were in so many close games. One of them not being the Eagles game, obviously. But I think that kind of, I don't know, it wasn't really a trap game, I don't think. But I think that a lot of people thought that this was going to be a blowout, and I think that's it's the NFL, right? That's what happens when you take your foot off the pedal. Teams are going to come back and stuff like that. And I think that there's something to be said for holding on to the win. I think if this was a loss, we would have been talking about it very differently. So we can kind of brush our shoulders off and get ready for the Vikings game. But you guys are right. Like there's a lot of kind of red flags where this isn't going to work against some better teams. And luckily, the Eagles have a pretty easy start to the season, but one of the games that is kind of a big worry in the first couple of weeks is this game we're going to talk about coming up. But I think you're right, Zach. Like I think the offense there's maybe a bit less to worry about than the defense, as Eric mentioned. Like there was some questionable calls, but I think the biggest thing is kind of same old Gannon, and that's a bit worrying, right? Is we got these new pieces and we got these new players, and honestly, Kaiser White played really well. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson played really well. But then same old Gannon,
Kaiser
right?
White's going to be a
Players are
problem,
only
dude.
good. Absolutely. I was really impressed. I knew he was going to be good, but just how good I wasn't sure, and he really showed out. So, what are your thoughts on kind of what you saw from the defense? Obviously, there was ebbs and flows, but what kind of stood out to you guys?
Well, first and foremost, I would definitely say it was more the same from Gannon, just like you did, and that, as you said, is worrisome because the entire thing that was preached to us was personnel, personnel, personnel. And that was the reason for some of the failures of the defense last year. That and a combination of just the lack of being prepared. And I think that is part mental, part physical. They're just there's so many missed tackles, man. Avonte Maddox in particular, just looked pretty rough out there. If I'm being honest, and so while there were some highlight plays, obviously the tip pick six is the one that comes to mind. All in all, it was a little concerning. You do have to wonder. So I mentioned Jordan Davis earlier, and Davis was impactful. He did have. I think Pro Football Focus rated him as what was the highest defensive lineman, highest rated defender, whatever the case was. He only played 22 snaps. Is the crazy thing. So when you look at that, you want to figure, well, why did he only play 22 snaps? Is it because after the lead was gained by the Eagles early on, they expected Detroit to throw, and think of Jordan Davis as more a run defender? Maybe, and if that was the rationale, it's a little more forgivable. The other more concerning side of the coin is it a lack of Jordan Davis being in shape? That's something I think a lot of people are kind of taking and running with, but I don't know how effective he would have been in the snaps that he did play if he was so out of shape. So I have hope for him in the future that he's going to have more and more snaps as the season progresses. Basically, as soon as Gannon hopefully realizes that the Eagles are just flat out better with him on the field. I love Marlon Tuipulotu, big Tuipulotu guy. I celebrated when the Eagles drafted him just because I do know that he is. I think he's a player in this league. I think that he's someone who's going to make a career for a long time in the NFL. Should not be playing. How many more snaps was it over Jordan Davis? 7 more, so that's an extra 10% over Jordan Davis. There's just nothing that you can really say to defend that in my eyes.
Yeah, I thought defensively, the one thing I think that it stood out to everybody for the most part is just how often the Detroit Lions were running at will. Swift, Williams, whether they were just bouncing off of tackles like Zach mentioned, and especially Avonte Maddox. One thing that nearly had my phone thrown across the room was when Goff was running downfield and he didn't slide, he was standing up, and you try to arm tackle Goff. Why aren't you trying to run your shoulder through his sternum? Yeah. I mean, that's the hit that you look for. You basically salivate for it. Like if it were to happen in Madden, I'm doing a hit stick every single time. So, yeah, I mean, how that happened a few times, the tackling, it never ceases to amaze me, how it just kind of disappears for the Eagles, and especially at the beginning of the season. I think that will tighten up. It did last year as well. But as far as Kaiser White is concerned, like I was somebody that I had my eye on for this defense at the beginning of the season, and honestly, it shows why in the first, right in the first game. He disrupted the pass, led to a pick six. There are things that are worth looking at. Actually, now Brian just actually mentioned a very good one. Epps played pretty well as jumping from the safety position down to the running backs, and they were trying to catch passes into the flats. Epps was pretty much there to meet pass catchers as soon as their feet were in the air before they can get back to the ground. He was tackling people for losses. There were those plays that were fantastic to see, and then there were times that it just looked like you can drive a Cadillac 80 yards downfield, and Swift just went off. And those are the things that I look at heading into the Vikings game with Dalvin Cook. Just if Swift can do that, Cook is absolutely going to do it. And then you got to worry about, the secondary. Jefferson's probably one of the best players in the game. I'm worried. I am a little worried after watching that first game going headed into week 2.
Yeah. I think you give some credit and some patience to how the defense played, just because there are so many new pieces, and there's going to be moving parts. But the one thing you don't expect is that the fundamentals are so bad. So the tackling, there's no excuse for that. The preparation, I mean, Swift is a really good running back, but you know what he's going to do, right? He's not 240 pounds. He's a fast guy. He's going to look to bounce it outside. And so there's a couple times where they just lost contain and he was able to, just bounce it to the outside and pick up yardage. And those are just fundamentals. It doesn't matter what team you play for. It doesn't matter what scheme you're in. You have to be gap sound and you have to make your tackles. So that is a bit worrying, I think. And then, talking about the safeties, again, I do think you give Chauncey Gardner-Johnson a bit more time. But I think, this is a question I had when he came in as well. Like he's typically a box safety, a guy who plays in the slot a lot. And then you got Marcus Epps, who, by all accounts is developing. But, another thing he does well is he comes downhill and makes tackles. So when you're playing a team like the Vikings, and again, we're going to talk about this more, is, you don't really have a true sideline to sideline guy back there. And if you drop two in a coverage, it might be tricky. And again, these are both athletes. Marcus Epps is an athlete, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are athletes, but just having that feel for the game as a deep safety, it's not something that you can just acquire overnight. So I'm curious to see what Jonathan Gannon has up the sleeve to kind of, kind of hide that. But the other thing too is I wonder if, in general, first week of the season, he kind of just overlooked how much. Again, it's the NFL, but when you come into a new season, you still have to assume your players don't know anything about what you're trying to do, right? So you have to teach from the ground up. And I think Jonathan Gannon heralded as this really intelligent player. When you have so many new pieces to your system, you lose track of the fundamentals. And then to go back to this kind of off zone coverage and watch Jared Goff kind of dissect you and move down the field and stuff like that. It's just, it just shades of last season. And so you hope for a bit of a change, you hope for a bit more aggression, and then that's kind of what you saw. So I think it just kind of took the wind out of the sails a little bit. But overall, again, you came out with the win. So the offense is really good. And we're going to kind of get into that as, Jalen Hurts was pretty fantastic. I saw a post kind of talking about how this offense really isn't designed to be a run heavy team or to be a pass heavy team, but how it's designed to be a Jalen Hurts heavy team. And, that's how he's going to play and kind of put the team on his shoulders. I mean, that's really as good as you can expect. Didn't make any mistakes, made his plays where he had to. Was all around pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't play exactly like that. So what I mean by that, first of all, Hurts was fantastic. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He was fantastic, and he didn't run too much excessively. When he ran, he kind of had to run, was kind of the unfortunate aspect of it. And he saved the team an unbelievable amount of times. 10, I believe he picked up 10 first downs, between his arms and his legs. So it's more so that the offensive line for the Eagles, I feel like needs some tightening up as well, so that Jalen Hurts does not have to play exactly as he played this past Sunday. Because if he has to play the way he played this past Sunday, I'm a little worried about his health as the season goes on. But I love the fact that I know that he's capable of playing in the way that he played this past Sunday, because it was crucial. Bailed out the offense time after time after time. He wasn't out there looking like, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. That's not Jalen Hurts. He's never going to have to be that. He's not the gunslinger that some people want to kind of change his game to be. He uses his legs to his advantage, and I think that he did that to a phenomenal degree. And if he can continue and that's not to say that his arm wasn't improved either. I thought he made a lot of throws that were improved over last season. I think that his mechanics have improved as well. It's not a finished project, but I mean, how many quarterbacks at his age are? So I think that Jalen Hurts, if you compare how I felt about him going in to how I feel after week one, it's positive improvement. It's absolutely positive improvement. And I think that's only going to get better as the season goes on from her. So I'm excited to see more from him. It was a little bit of a vanilla offense once again, but I think that's more so them trying to kind of establish a rhythm for Hurts as opposed to not having faith in him. So the offense is obviously only going to go as far as the quarterback, but again, all in all, positive experience for Jalen Hurts.
I agree. He kept the Philadelphia Eagles in the game in the first quarter, especially bailing the Eagles out of third and longs pretty often, actually. I do worry about some of the decisions that he makes, scribbling outside of the pocket. He flirted with intentional grounding 2 or 3 times early on that could have went back to bite the Eagles, but it didn't. The rushing, offense altogether. I believe he had 90 yards as quarterback. Three or other running backs had touchdowns as Gainwell, Scott, and Sanders. I think that he opens up the running game for his running backs because he's also a threat himself. So that's going to stay kind of par for the course from last season for the Eagles. Passing downfield to AJ Brown, I mean, that's quite a receiver that we have now to kind of bail some of his 50-50 balls out. I think everybody in the city would like to see him get Smitty in there. There's a little bit more. More in general, not a little bit more. I mean, a little bit more would say that, hey, he gets one pass. But I would like to see a mix of everything. I thought Goddard was featured pretty well. But I think the only real sloppy part that stood out on Sunday was the offensive line took a little bit to adjust. And the defensive line for the Lions is not a bad defensive line. They were able to take on a pretty sound defense, a gritty defense that Dan Campbell has. We've all seen on Hard Knocks. And if that's the Eagles that are out of shape, and they're still able to handle the Lions handle just barely, but they escape with the victory. I think the challenge really does lie ahead again with the Vikings. Seeing how that defense plays Hurts might humble the Eagles a little bit, but we got to find he has to find those open receivers a little bit more often. I think that a lot of defenses are shading him to one side of the field, trying to make him play only roughly that is 52, 53 yards across. So trying to make him play like 26 yards, half of that field. It's hard for him to find the one, maybe open passer if he's kind of taken away an entire field away from him. He's forcing himself to run maybe a little bit too early at times. He does have the option to do so, but I would like to see him make more of those throws that Zach alluded to, where he did show that he's worked on it. And I think he's more improved from last season. I think he has this tenacity to win and a will to win. They get, the Philadelphia Eagles over the hump, and that's what we saw in the first half. But as far as if he's the guy, I think there's a lot more that we have to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the offensive line, I think like Detroit did a really good job. They brought in that NASCAR package early with the 4 defensive ends and did some confusing stuff. I know they're stacking the two ends over top of Lane Johnson. I think Johnson struggled a bit. Obviously, you're just gonna start kind of hitting that hill where you really have to be a smarter tackle, and he's not gonna be able to rely on his athleticism as much. I do think that Mailata handled himself a bit better, but I think the credit to the Detroit Lions, like they came in with a plan that likely Sirianni didn't have time to prepare for. That's just Dan Campbell, man. He's a great defensive coach. He gets his guys ready to go. He's a smart guy. He's going to do some interesting stuff, and he's going to put his guys in a position to win. So, I think they'll figure that out. Obviously, Jeff Stoutland's one of the best in the business, right? So, I think there's look back on the film, they'll figure it out. And I think it's always tough in the first week, right? You don't have film on what guys are doing, and obviously they're going to expand off that. But the Lions are a tough team to get in week one for that reason. Is there's a lot of new pieces, there's a lot of stuff they're bringing in. So what I like the most is that I like that Jalen Hurts was looking at his checkdowns when they were open. Like there's a lot of times last year when he would throw to his checkdowns, but he's making sure that he has no other options first. And like sometimes when you got a guy open, man, like again, it's the NFL. You got to get that ball open and let him make a play. Like this offense is so full of playmakers. That's really all you need to do in this offense. That's how they designed this whole team, right? This roster is there's so many playmakers, and Eric was talking about how they use Goddard and like just get the ball in that man's hands, right? Just get the ball in Miles Sanders' hands. Just get the ball in one of your 3 pretty impressive running backs after the catch. They're all pretty good. They can all make people miss. Boston Scott, especially if you're playing a New York team. But I think that's kind of what we need to see from Jalen Hurts. And then what was what was really exciting to watch is just that ability to escape the pocket and make first downs and make something out of nothing. So, I think he'll get there. I think again, like the offensive line, they saw some things they weren't prepared for. The pocket kind of collapsed. I think that his internal clock was a bit better this year. The footwork was a bit better. I think eventually we're going to get to the point, and it might be against Minnesota this upcoming week, where we see Jalen Hurts truly have to, commit to the drop back and look at his reads and throw those routes that are more into that deep third. I think there's still challenges. I think this week is going to be one of those. But you got to be impressed with what you saw, and I think that another player that I'm sure we'd like to talk about is just how good Miles Sanders looked. After not scoring a touchdown all of last season, got one in week 1. Looked good running the football. He had one 24-yard run, but I think outside of that, still averaged 6 yards a carry. I mean, like, what more can you ask for from Miles Sanders? I think that regardless of how much this team wants to throw the ball, they're going to be able to run it again this year. So that's really revealing and what they're going to be able to do.
So yeah, I would kind of jumping off of from the people who I guess really weren't part of the offense on Sunday. Quez Watkins, kind of like Smitty, wasn't really a part of the game either. Do we see really Quez or I know we see Smitty get into the offense. Hurts told him as much after the game. How much of a role do we see Quez in there, especially with Pascal?
Well, it's really interesting because, first of all, the Eagles actually ran a lot more 12 personnel, I think, than many were expecting going into the season. We didn't have the tandem of Ertz and Goddard, so I think there was kind of a premature thought, and I know I was guilty of this. Of not that 12 personnel would go away by any means, but just that we'd see a good bit more 11 personnel, especially since we added AJ Brown. We did add Zach Pascal, who he's for a large part here for his run blocking, not just his threat as a receiver, but even still, it's curious against Minnesota. I think we're probably still going to see more Zach Pascal, just because we're still trying to establish the run. Morgan said that this isn't necessarily a run first offense. It's a Jalen Hurts offense, I believe is what you refer to it as. And, to help Hurts really get into that rhythm, it's important to have players like Pascal who are out there able to block, because Kez is a nice receiver. He's a very good speed threat. If the game plan is to involve Smitty more and especially out of the slot, then I think that you're looking at some more Watkins. But otherwise, I think it's probably going to be another Pascal every week for opportunities when they are working 3 receivers out on the field.
Yeah, I mean, against the Lions, one of the main weaknesses, even on paper, is just the linebacking core. I feel like the plan coming in was to attack out with the run game and then just hitting stuff over the middle, and that's kind of where Zach Pascal thrives. I don't know really if Watkins provides the same kind of threat. Obviously, he's going to take the top off, but I think his route running still needs some refinement. Doesn't really have the body to be taking a whole bunch of shots, whereas Zach Pascal has absolutely no issue with that. So I think that's kind of the game plan for the Lions. I think the Vikings could be different. They have a pretty fantastic linebacking core, and I think that's where you kind of want Dallas Goedert competing with those guys, and then you're going to look to create some space just with Quez Watkins taking the top off. But speaking on the Vikings, we got our guest here, Tyler from the Vikings Wire. So I'm gonna add him on, and we'll talk some Vikings. Welcome, Tyler. It's good to have you.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. How's everybody doing tonight?
Fantastic, man.
We're great.
Yeah. Both coming off wins, so we can't really complain, It's
always good to beat the Lions, and I speak from experience.
Of course. Closer than we thought. And I think, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on the Lions, but I think, coming into this, we were talking about how they might be a team that are better than a lot of people thought they would be. And especially with so many moving parts, we talked about how tough that is to face in week 1. But, the Vikings as well, put on a show, especially Justin Jefferson. What were your thoughts on their week 1?
So here's the big thing with the Lions. I think Dan Campbell's got that ship righted. They're doing the right things. They are taking things. They basically took things bare bones. They knew they didn't have a lot of talent last year, so they tried to do things the right way. They were competitive in games they had no business even being close in. They took the Rams down to the absolute limit, and they beat the Vikings once. They should have beat them twice, and they ended up getting the second overall pick. There's nothing more dangerous than a team that gets an influx of talent when they're playing hard. And that is a team that plays hard. They play for their coach. They play with their head coach. And I think Campbell is going to take them to places that they've never been before. It's going to take time. They still need a quarterback of the future. Goff is capable enough with that offensive line. We saw the running game against the Eagles, and they have some good weapons on the outside. They still need to keep fortifying the roster. But the way the Lions are trajecting, this team, if they won 8 games this year, wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if they won 5. But they are going to be better, and they are going to be way more competitive.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think I think that again, like just the way that this roster is built is just those intelligent players that play hard. They got that new linebacker in the 5th round, and just a tough kid, right? And so it was not necessarily shocking, but they put up a contest, and I'm curious what your thoughts were. I'm not sure how much the game you watched. You were probably busy watching the Vikings game, but what kind of you thought of the other side of the football, like what you saw in the Eagles, where do you think, okay, well, maybe they're going to play up a bit next week playing the Vikings, or this kind of expose some things that you think the Vikings can expose?
I think the biggest thing with this Eagles team is you have to stop the run. They are going to come at you in a lot of different ways with a lot of different players. It's not a mistake that there were 4 Eagles that had rushing touchdowns on Sunday. They know how to run the ball. They know how to run it well. Hurts is a very weird quarterback. And I say that in a loving way, because if you watch him from his freshman year at Alabama to where he is now, every year he's significantly improved, but he still has his limitations. So he's not going to be able to drive that deep out with a lot of velocity, but he's going to make relatively smart decisions. He can make good throws, and he has that mobile element, which one helps open up passing lanes because you have RPOs, you have bootlegs, and he can do a lot of those things on the run. I like what Hurts brings to this offense, and this is put up or shut up time for him. You got A.J. Brown. You have a solid running game. The offensive line is fortified. It's in good health for now. We all know that Lane Johnson likes to get hurt every year, but hopefully he can stay healthy for this team. And you have Devonta Smith, who, even though he didn't have a catch on Sunday, I'm not worried about him because the guy knows how to get open. He's a very smooth and savvy route runner, and he proved that he could be an alpha. And now he's got an alpha on the other side. Give it some time. That offense is going to fully gel. And when it does, with all the stars that they have on the defensive side of the football, it's up to Hurts. Hurts can take this team very far, but he has to be able to take that next step himself.
No, I agree 100% about that. I think our rushing offense is going to be probably the strongest point of the Eagles' offense this season. So, yeah, your analysis is dead on, I think.
Yeah, concern from the Philadelphia side is, when you look at Minnesota, the 5-man front, inside linebackers, of course, there's former Eagle Jordan Hicks, Michael Kendricks, former Eagles brother Eric Kendricks, who is even better than his brother was. There's quite an ensemble defensively there, potentially stopping the run. We saw Aaron Jones have a little bit of trouble as well. What is the confidence level that you have in Minnesota's run defense to be able to slow down that Philadelphia rushing attack?
Honestly, right now it's about a 6. They are still gelling because the starters basically played a total of 9 snaps in the preseason. Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith did not play a single one of those. They're still trying to figure it out. Most of these guys on the roster played with Mike Zimmer, and they were running basically the same style of defense, albeit it went from more of a cover 3 to a quarters approach at the end because they lost some good cornerbacks on the outside, and they had to kind of mitigate that. But you're doing a completely different style. Ed Donatel runs that Vic Fangio scheme, absolutely loves running stunts So the Eagles offensive line needs to have really good communication in order to stop that. Vikings did pressure Aaron Rodgers 18 times and got 4 sacks out of the deal, including an interception and a strip sack, which resulted in a field goal. This team can go far, and it's very dangerous when you have 4 guys getting home, because then Ed Donatel does not have to blitz. They only blitz twice. Think of the 2018 Bears defense. That's what they're trying to emulate. They're trying to get pressure with Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter, and if they can do that, then they don't have to blitz. They can just play coverage, and it's incredibly difficult to continuously face 7, 8-man coverages when you're getting pressure with just 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and that's kind of going to lead me into what I was hoping to talk about next is that back end of the Vikings defense. Now, obviously, you have Harrison Smith, who's a perennial Pro Bowler, and if you're getting home on the front end, it may not matter, but obviously the Eagles do have 2 what could be number 1 receivers for a lot of teams, and then they have Dallas Goedert, who's another fantastic receiver, along with all these running backs that can catch passes. What is your feeling if the Vikings can't get home, or I mean, obviously you're not going to get home on every single play. So, what is your opinion on how the secondary can deal with this? I mean, onslaught of talent of the receiving core.
So it's going to be interesting. I have not had the chance to watch the All-22 back from the Eagles-Lions game yet, but Jalen Hurts can struggle to get off of his first read. And if they can have at least coverage right away, like, hey, you're going to run like a deeper concept. Let's say you're going to run dagger. All right. You got the dig coming in on the backside, and then you have a seam route. All right. Well, if that dig is covered, well, where's Hurts going to go? Is he going to be able to progress to that second read? If you can get that first read covered, that can really hinder a lot of the Eagles passing game unless Hurts has really made that step. So I'm a little worried. Patrick Peterson is still a good football player, but he is not what we all remember him to be. He is a solid cornerback 2, which is very valuable in today's NFL. You need those type of players. Cam Dantzler in his 3rd year out of Mississippi State. A lot of people remember him from the draft, known as the Needle. He decided to gain some bad weight, so he didn't weigh in at 180 pounds, ended up running a 4.64. He's been pretty good, but the problem was with Zimmer that he asked his cornerbacks to do an absolute lot. And sometimes those guys just think too much, and when you're thinking, you're losing on the field. So now it's a little bit of a simpler system that he has, and he can just react instead of having to think before he does that. I think Dantzler is going to be really good in this system. It's going to take a little time. The Eagles might be catching the Vikings at the right spot. Andrew Booth Jr., the 2nd-round pick, did not play that well in the preseason. A lot of penalties, and then had a mid-ankle sprain in the 2nd preseason game. Didn't play in the 3rd one, and only played special team snap last week. He was surpassed in the depth chart by 4th-round pick at Caleb Evans. So you have a really young cornerback room after those top 2 guys and Shannon Sullivan in the slot. The Eagles can take advantage of that if they're able to run some longer concepts, force these guys to cover for 5-6 seconds, let Jalen Hurts use his legs. But Hurts has to be able to progress from that first read. And I think that's going to be the dichotomy that we're talking about come Tuesday morning. Was Hurts able to get off that first read and take advantage of these corners? Or was he struggling too much to do that and started to panic, scramble too much? The Vikings got some sacks. He threw the ball away, but he's going to have some positive plays mixed in as well. I think the cornerback wide receiver matchup early in the play is going to be a really fascinating one to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
one thing I definitely have to ask about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing I definitely have to ask about, Tyler. So obviously, we'd be remiss if we did not mention Jalen Reagor. More so, the question I guess that we're wondering is the expectation that because the Vikings didn't really involve him heavily in the offense against the Green Bay Packers, and is that a trait that you're expecting to continue? Is that something you think they're kind of give him a chance to, in a sense, get back at his old team, or they kind of relieve that back to returning punts for him? Are we expecting to see much of Reagor, or mainly just in special team situations?
Genuinely don't know at this point. Obviously, we know Reagor was traded late in the process. He's only been with the Vikings organization for 2 weeks. So being that he's only been with the team for 2 weeks, he hasn't had a lot of opportunity to really absorb the offense. He is listed as the 4th wide receiver, but I'll also say this. The Vikings ran 11 personnel on 67% of their plays. All of them, every single one of those plays had these three guys on the field: Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne. I don't know how much action Rager's going to see on the offensive side of the football, just because how new he is to the system and how they used their personnel in week one. I think if he is comfortable enough in the system, they're going to intentionally involve him because, one, he's going to be extra motivated to go back to Philadelphia because he's going to feel, one, that he was wronged by either the organization or the fan base or both. But in reality, we all know what the deal was. He did not live up to his potential. And quite frankly, both sides needed a split. He needed a fresh start. And quite frankly, the team did too. So I'm very intrigued to see how he gets used. At the very least, he's going to return punts. They may end up throwing him back on kicks just to try and get him some extra touches, or maybe scheme some stuff up like, hey, jet sweep, reverse. They had Justin Jefferson move into the backfield via motion. They ran a couple times out of it, and they tried a swing pass to him, which was read pretty quickly. So there's ways that Kevin O'Connell can get him involved. I genuinely don't know at this point if he's going to, because we haven't seen any evidence of him wanting to do that at this point.
On Rager, I'm wondering, do you think that he didn't do so well on the Eagles just because we didn't compliment his calves and his thighs enough? And how big of a factor that played?
Listen, I'll say this. I'm a giant pro wrestling fan. I am actually launching an AEW podcast with Voices of Wrestling here this week. And I love stuff like this. It's just, it's peak football, right? Just a coach talking about like, oh, I love this guy's physique, and then getting into detail about it. It's so incredibly stupid. But obviously, Jalen Reagor is a physical specimen. There's a reason why teams thought high enough of him to take him at 21 overall. Now, you can go into the debate, should they have taken him over Jefferson? No, I don't think they should have taken him over Denzel Mims. And look where Mims is at in New York. Like, so much of this is a crapshoot, and you have to project what these guys were in college to what they're going to be in the NFL. And unfortunately for the Eagles and Reagor, just happened to be a miss. There is still talent on the bone. Can Kevin O'Connell extract some out of him to make him a really capable player? At the very least, he's a depth wide receiver at a pretty cheap price with returnability. So could it have been too much that they paid? Maybe. But I think it was worth the risk. And the Eagles got, quite frankly, a great return considering what they got out of him in 2 years.
Okay. Staying on the receiving core, I think there's a lot of focus on Justin Jefferson, and especially with the safeties we have in house, kind of figuring out where they fit. He might be a massive problem, but I'm curious as well. Jonathan Gannon seems to be hell bent on playing this off zone coverage where he's going to make teams march down the field. And Adam Thielen could have a fantastic game if that's the game that the Eagles try and play. So I'm curious to see. I think the Vikings are a team that can be multiple and do a lot of things. They also have a fantastic running back in the backfield. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you think this offense will attack this Eagles defense.
They're gonna try and confuse you. That when Kevin O'Connell got hired, he talked about a phrase, the illusion of complexity. He comes from the McVay tree. They're gonna run the same stuff, and they're gonna run it into the ground. But the problem is they're gonna run it out of so many different formations and with different variations that it's not really gonna matter too much because you're not gonna necessarily know what's coming. And they're gonna continue to use a lot of jet motion, and they're going to run the same concepts. Like I mentioned, Justin Jefferson in the backfield. They motion him in. They run the ball with Dalvin a couple times. And then on top of that, they ended up later on in the game using that same setup, and then they try to swing pass with Jefferson to the outside. They're going to continue to do different things, but they're going to do everything the same but different. It's like going to Buffalo Wild Wings and you're going to order 10 traditional wings, but every time you get a different sauce. That's basically what the Vikings offense is. It's the same basic concepts spread out and served in different packages. So I'll tell you what, if they want to play that off zone, Adam Thielen's just going to eat for like 10-yard routes all game, because while he's 32 years old, the guy did run at one point a 4.4. He is fast. He's crafty. He's built thicker than you think. And he knows how to play a physical brand of football when it comes to going up and getting it. So I would be a little concerned with that. But at the same time, you don't want to let Jefferson beat you on that 64-yarder. They ran what's called the wave concept. On the front side, you've got a crosser and a post. Backside, you've got a shallow and a deep crosser. When he's on the backside, he gets the crosser. They don't pass over the coverage. He's wide open by about 10 yards, and then he ends up just taking it, then gets that 64. Like, there has to be communication on the back end because they're going to do so many of the same things with basically just giving you different looks. So there has to be a lot of learning on the sideline for the Eagles, and you have to be able to talk on the field. Passing coverages, especially if you're playing a lot of match zone, there's going to be stuff that comes at you that they're not 100% sure on just because of that illusion of complexity factor.
Now, I know after watching that Eagles and Lions game, I was definitely thinking to myself about the Eagles' rushing defense and how they would stack up against guys like Dalvin Cook. Watching that Packers and the Vikings game, watching how Jefferson was able to be pretty much open at will at any moment he wanted to against the Packers and that defense, do you think that it was more so just the right scheme against a bad Packers defense, and are you more I guess interested to see them against what should be on paper a better Eagles defense?
So I think that's a very loaded question. And I'm going to kind of attack it from a few angles here because it's a very fair point. The Packers should have strayed away from their base zone concepts, and they should have let Jair Alexander travel with Justin Jefferson. They didn't. They wanted to stay true to their defense, and they got beat. Cousins was pressured 9 times, but he was only sacked once. He was pressured 18 times. He was hit 9. But Cousins, if you had a chance to watch the game, looked like a different quarterback. He looked more confident. He looked more calculated. He was making smarter, crisper, quicker decisions. He felt like he had been playing in this offense for like the last 15 years. It was really remarkable how vastly different he looked on Sunday versus what he looked at last year. And when you talk about kind of like the difference between the two defenses, if you want to beat Cousins, you got to get home, and you got to get home from the inside. Fletcher Cox is going to have to be that guy. You're going to want to get a little bit more out of Jordan Davis than you did last week because I think he only played 22 snaps, but when he was in, he was a physical monster. Garrett Bradbury at center, great run blocker. I think he can block Jordan Davis successfully, consistently in the running game because of how he blocks, how he moves, and the positioning he gets with his hands when he's doing those reach blocks. Problem is, Davis is going to lift him up and put him on the counter like he's getting a Happy Meal from McDonald's. Like, he just has no anchor. He can't really do any of that. Ed Ingram, the right guard, rookie out of LSU, second-round pick. I think he can take Davis. Problem is, he's been oversetting too much, is not consistent enough with his pass sets. In 15 true pass sets per PFF, he had a pass blocking grade of 2.8. Like, it was a rough stretch for Ingram, but the run game, he had a grade of over 80. It was a very much a mixed bag up and down for him. If you want to beat the Vikings, you get pressure, and you get pressure from the inside because you're not getting past Darrisaw and O'Neal with any form of consistency. Darrisaw was getting offseason comparisons to Trent Williams. I think those are a little lofty, but you're talking guys like Albert Breer who were making those kind of comparisons. We're not talking like little beat writers. We're not talking bloggers. We're talking big boys. So when big boys make those kind of comparisons, you got to listen and at least think about it. O'Neal's a top 5 right tackle in football. He gets no recognition because he's boring. He's bland. He doesn't pancake guys. He doesn't try to take the spotlight. He's not necessarily a fan favorite. Like, if you put him and Lane Johnson next to each other, you're going to see very comparable things. You're still going to prefer Lane Johnson, but the Eagles fan base, from my perspective, have really attached to Lane, and they love him, and he's kind of the epitome of what the Eagles are. Brian O'Neal's a dude. He's just a guy that's really good at football. There isn't quite that connection. So he's not necessarily thought of among fans and a lot of the higher profile media as one of those guys. But Brandon Thorne, if you know Brandon Thorne, Trench Warfare, he thinks incredibly highly of O'Neal. You got to win on the inside, and you got to cover these receivers. You can do that. Vikings are a very beatable football team.
I think you described O'Neal just like how every other fellow Delawarean is, just a dude. So
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's kind of an ideal offensive lineman, right? Where you talk about a good day for an offensive lineman is when you don't hear his name called. So if you have a guy who just kind of goes to work, grinds, you don't hear you don't hear about any mistakes that an offensive lineman makes. I'm sure you'll definitely take that at the end of the day, and in time, hopefully, people develop the appreciation for a guy as solid as he is.
Oh, absolutely. And the wild thing about O'Neal is I think he didn't allow a sack until his 4th year in the league, which, considering he was drafted 62 overall in 2018, the local media ripped the Vikings for taking him because they're like, oh, everybody was gone and you just took a guy to take a guy. Well, the Vikings have done a really poor job of drafting offensive linemen, especially on the interior. O'Neal started playing in his 2nd game after Rashad Hill got hurt, and he did not let go of the position. Like, they ended up hitting big time with him. And then they took Ezra Cleveland, who's a Brian O'Neill clone, and now he's a stalwart left guard for the team. So they're starting to figure it out. And I agree. Like, the only guys that really hear their name called are when Darisaw decides to pancake a guy into Mars, or Garrett Bradbury for allowing his umpteenth pressure of the year. So if the interior is going to be the real key.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of already got to that point, but I was curious to talk about the offensive line, because I think if there is maybe a weakness on that offense, it might be that. But I'm curious also to stretch that a bit further and talk about the things that maybe you are worried about with this Eagles team. For example, like if the Vikings lose, it would be because of this. And I think you've done a really good job of kind of talking. If you get pressure on Cousins and you're able to cover the receivers, I myself have doubts about whether or not Gannon is going to draw anything up. I think again, the Eagles definitely have the talent to be a defense. They might be held back by the scheme a bit. But what stands out to you is, like, okay, obviously the defensive is pretty fantastic on the Eagles. The linebackers are getting better. There's some holes in the secondary, but you got two pretty solid starting corners. So what really scares you about this Eagles defense?
That's a really good question. It obviously stinks that Derek Barnett tore his ACL, because I think it would have given the Eagles 2 really good pass rushers that could help contribute. But unfortunately, he is gone for the year, and that kind of hinders the pass rush on the outside. I'd say the one thing that worries me is if they do a lot of pre-snap, post-snap shifts in coverage, and they try and confuse Cousins. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, one of my favorite players in the NFL. I'm a big Florida Gator fan, so I got to watch his entire career at Florida. The guy is nasty. He is incredibly talented. He can do a little bit everything else. The guy started out as a corner of Florida. They moved him to safety. He played star, kind of like a slot role. He can do a little bit of everything. So I saw the question from one of your listeners. I wouldn't worry too much about it just because of what his skill set is. If they can confuse Cousins pre-snap versus post-snap on coverages and take advantage of that. Cousins is a very accurate passer, but he can be prone to picks if you confuse him a little bit. I'd say that's my biggest concern. And then him getting rattled. If they get a couple sacks early, Cousins will start playing timid. And if Cousins plays timid, it's game over. Dalvin Cook's going to have to take over and win the football game. Plus, like I said, interior pressure. Fletcher Cox isn't 25 anymore, but he's still Fletcher Cox, and he can still get to the quarterback. If he gets to the quarterback, and he does with any form of consistency, because I remember that 2018 game where the Vikings went back to Lincoln Financial Field and they ended up winning. Fletcher Cox was a monster in that game. If he can duplicate any form of that, the Vikings are in trouble.
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate your insight. We've kind of come to the point of the show where we make some predictions. Frankly, I was feeling a lot more confident about the prediction before I saw the Eagles play the Lions, especially on the defensive side of the football. But that being said, I'm not sure if you want to go first, Tyler. We'll give you the chance to defer if you'd like to. But what's your prediction for how the game plays out? And if you'd like to throw a score out there, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'll be honest, I've done a lot of talking today, which I have no problem doing, and I know that's why I was brought on, but I'd like to kind of hear your guys' thoughts from an Eagles perspective before I kind of chip in with mine, because you've heard a lot from me already.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm going to start, I guess, to be the bearer of bad news. I do think the Vikings make the Eagles 1-1. I do think the game it'll probably be within a touchdown, so I'll say between 5 to 7. I don't have a lot of faith in Gannon's defense, especially against a better offense than what the Lions were in comparison to, obviously this is being week 2. I don't know how much will change. Maybe it could a lot. Maybe we can see a whole different Vikings team than we did in week 1 against the Packers. But I look at the Vikings and I think they're more threatening as far as talent is concerned in the ways that the coverage didn't really work out against the running attack against Detroit. And honestly, Dalvin Cook does kind of put the fear in you a little bit when you can't stop Swift. So now you got to stop probably a top 5 running back in the league. By the way, with the number 1 wide receiver, maybe number 2. I mean, I don't know where you put Devontae Adams up there, but that guy's a stud as well. But at the end of the day, you got elite players, and Kirk Cousins is, like you said, he settled into that offense. He looked like a stud. The Eagles, I think there's a little bit more to be desired before I, can hang my hat and say that's my prediction. So I'm going to go with the Vikings, and Eagles will be 1-1. Vikings move on to be 2-0.
Yeah, I don't want to bring the mood down any further, but I might actually be in agreement here with Eric. It's a game that I don't think Philadelphia gets blown out. I think these are 2 really interesting, very closely matched teams. This is going to be a great game to watch, regardless of the outcome. I truly feel, but I do think in the end that Minnesota's offense just proves to be just a little bit too much for Philadelphia, and so I'm thinking it's really close, but I'm thinking 34-31 Vikings.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple things that kind of set the stage for this contest. I think one, as impressive as the Vikings were early in the season, that's when you want to play Aaron Rodgers, right? You want to play him early in the season. How many seasons have we seen him come out after 4 weeks of the Packers not looking as good as they should, and then he has some clickbait quote where it's like, "Hey, we're going to turn around," and then all of a sudden they start winning. So I do think that this Packers team was very impressive, and the Vikings, to their credit, do what you do against those kind of teams, and you pound them into the ground, you throw over the top of their head, and you be dominant, right? So I think that's not a discredit to the Vikings. But I think that there are some things that you're going to see different from the Eagles, and you definitely saw from the Packers. So I think the key for the Eagles, if they are going to win this football game, is one. I don't think you can settle for many field goals. I think this is a Vikings offense that's going to have their way with an Eagles defense is still figuring out. So I think Jalen Hurts can stall in the red zone, and I do think that the Vikings are going to do a better job of kind of making you be more methodical, taking away your first read, like Tyler said. I think they're going to do a better job of that than the Lions did. And I think the question on the offense is going to be obviously how good can Jalen Hurts be, but how ready is that offensive line and that running game to be complicated, right? Again, it's kind of like lipstick on a pig. The Eagles do the same thing as the Vikings do, where they show you a lot of looks in the run game, and then they're pulling a guard the opposite way, and then they're out the gate, right? So I think it's how ready is that Eagles offense. We didn't have to do it against the Lions, so to have it ready and to have it ready for a Monday night game, which could mean the difference between a playoff seed later in the season, realistically, is how ready is that run game to be that complex running game that we've seen. On the defensive side of the ball, man, like we just have to see something different from Jonathan Gannon, right? We just have to see some confidence. Like we have two of their corners were number 1 corners last season, right? And you went out and acquired Bradbury to be essentially a 1B corner, and then you make him play off, which doesn't make sense to me. So I think that you need to see some confidence from Jonathan Gannon and let these corners cover maybe more man, because I just don't have confidence that if you play this zone that the safeties are going to come to play. I'm really nervous about that. I think that's where it's going to be able to pick them apart. We're used to seeing him play in Washington, and if you allow him to sit back in the pocket and read a defense, he'll pick you apart. And as Tyler was saying too, this is a much improved Vikings offensive line, and the Eagles, I think, that's one of the areas where we wanted to see a bit more from them, is with how good this defensive line is, just seeing a bit more pressure. So maybe they figure it out this week, but I think it's really just the play calling. And, Jonathan Gannon kind of dialed up the blitz at some points and then went off it, and then obviously the lines started coming back. So confidence on defense, and then just, what Sirianni can dial up. I wanted to say the Eagles could win this one and pull this one out, but I am a bit nervous. The way the defense looked, I just don't think they have it together. I think it is going to be a high-scoring affair, with the Vikings just being more ready. I think they just look like a more ready team than the Eagles are right now. But that being said, I think there's a very evenly matched competition, and it's going to be a fun one to watch no matter what.
It's a very interesting game for me, guys. The line right now is Philly -2.5, which basically means it's a pick 'em on a neutral field. So, and we all know that Lincoln Financial Field is a home field advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles. The fans are raucous. I still remember the 2017 championship game. They were throwing full beers at children. Like, that is a fan base that loves the Eagles and hates whoever walks in. And it's going to be a raucous atmosphere, and especially with Jalen Reagor on the sidelines, it is probably going to be just a little bit extra with how much hatred the fan base has built up for him. Kirk Cousins has not fared very well on Monday Night Football. I believe he's like 2-10 overall on Monday night. Not exactly what you would call a raucous record and something that you feel confident in, but I think he's won 2 of his last 3, which kind of signals at least a shift in that kind of thinking and philosophy. Cousins is going to have to stay composed. He's going to have to stay confident and calculated in the pocket, just like he was on Sunday. There are 2 issues with that. One, he's pulled these games out before, and then he's gone back to his normal self, kind of like just reserved, wanting everything to be flawless, which there were some issues with that. And I wrote a piece for the Vikings Wire breaking down his checkdowns and ranking them on how cowardly they were, which if you know Cousins, he kind of has a rap for that. So, and then 2, the Eagles have film on the Vikings now. They're going to have an opportunity to at least have one game where, like, okay, they did these things. They're obviously not going to do all of these things, but we at least know a little bit of what we're going to be dealing with, because the Packers didn't. And the third thing, week 1 is always kind of a preseason game. So are you going to get a bad Eagles defense? Are you going to get a great Vikings offense? Like, there's so many more questions coming out of week 1 than there were going into it. I genuinely don't know how to predict this game, but I will say I think it's going to be close. The over-under is 51.5. I think they're going to go over that because I don't see these defenses playing a lot of great defense, and I think they're going to allow some points. Right now, I would put it as Vikings 31-28, but I could easily be swayed for it to be Eagles 31-28, just because that home field advantage is a massive deal.
Well, Tyler, we appreciate you coming on and giving us some of your time and a lot of great insights. For those of our fans that don't know you, if you could tell them where to find you, where they can check out some of your fantastic content, and also, hey, the wrestling podcast as well. Shout that out too. I'm sure people want to check that out.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealForno. I post pretty much all my content there. I am the managing editor of the Vikings Wire. I'm a writer for the 33rd Team, where I work with former NFL players and coaches in front office. I worked with former Vikings GM Rick Spielman today. Really nice guy. Some great insight from him. I also do an Against the Spread college football article for a site called Fantasy Points. And then the wrestling podcast is with Voices of Wrestling. Debut episode drops tomorrow. It's called The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy. And we're going to talk everything AEW. And it's a really fun debut episode. We're going to get some of our insights on the CM Punk Elite drama and then break down Dynamite and kind of where things are and where things are headed.
Yeah, I'll be listening.
Again, yeah, I'm sure. He saw the eyes light up when he saw that. So I'm sure you'll have some listeners, and especially from our group. And again, just thank you for coming on. We really appreciate you. I'm sure we're all looking forward to this matchup, and it'll be a good one. So, we appreciate your time, and thanks for talking with us. And I hate to say it while you're on the podcast, but go Birds.
Go Birds.
Skull Vikings, baby. I appreciate your time too, gentlemen. Thank you.
Go Birds.
Of course.